it's important because individuals who were children then are adults now and can look back on that experience and tell us how traumatizing it was for them. And so I think it is important for us in the 21st century to hear what people went through, how it affected them, and how those effects are actually long-standing. By addressing it today, it does help to sort things out. It helps to put things in historical perspective. And I think most importantly, it helps people who do not know the historical facts to understand what people went through, how courageous they were, how they stood up for their rights, despite the protesters who in many instances were vile and angry and showed their hostility against these children for riding a school bus out of their own home area, if you will, to another area.
I think it would be critical to have a truth process around the busing process. I think it would start to begin the healing process. I think there are a lot of people who are still so deeply disturbed about what happened during the busing crisis and so disillusioned and cynical about the possibility for change.
I think it would be useful because there are people who have really been traumatized by this experience, and to have it lying dormant beneath everything that is occurring in the school system today does not help people to make really good choices.
It evokes all kinds of emotions in people who either have heard about the busing during the time that it was implemented, have also heard about Boston and have formed opinions about Boston based on the whole desegregation period. I know people whose parents pulled them out of Boston public schools totally, put them in Metco if they could, put them in private schools if they could, and I think there's still that stigma around Boston public schools and around equity and racism.
We still come into situations where people are not culturally competent. When they speak, they say things that degrade people. In many instances, that is done in the presence of children today. And so the struggle goes on. I know that this is not a period in time where we can afford to let up on pressing for the truth to be known and for the truth to come out and for the truth to be dealt with.
At the statistics today, and the school is as segregated today as it was then. And it's just different, and there are more Black and Latinos in the school than white. And why? Because most whites have left the school system because they're seeking a better education for their students. And when you have a school system that where the majority of the teachers do not come from a similar background as the students, you know, you're not able to reach them in a lot of ways that make sense to the students.
It does, in the fact that while I was working in Boston Public Schools, they actually informed us, probably now about 10 years ago, perhaps 9 years ago, that the student assignment process was going to change. and that there weren't going to be any more set-asides for particular groups of people, of kids in the schools. My school that I was an administrator of was in West Roxbury. And when we first started, we had about 33% Latinos, 33% African Americans, 33% white. Now, the school is smack dab in the middle of a white neighborhood, and I think that a lot of times, if you don't consider the fact that we're such territorial people here in Boston and that certain groups settle in certain areas, that you're never going to have a desegregated or a school that's integrated unless you have some set-asides. And so what has happened now is the reverse. I see that my school that I was in is now more segregated than it had ever been when we first started, and it was because of the change in the process of student assignment.
In terms of, when I think of very specifically the Black community and Black people's willingness to really be hopeful about whether things can really change in terms of improving public education for all children, particularly African American and Latino American and children of color generally, whether we can really, whether there is a commitment and the will to make that change. And I think going back and really having a large group engaged in really looking at what happened and beginning to really re-examine those issues and reflect on them, and hopefully we'll begin to maybe transform some of those painful feelings and disillusionment about what happened during busing, and hopefully open the doors where people can see the possibility for making change and a commitment to quality education for all children.
I think that it is important for the younger generation to understand history, not just because it happened in the past, but to understand history and look for parallels today. I think it would give children a sense of pride to know what other children went through in a different era, when desegregation was by law, and it will help children today to be courageous about struggles that they are confronting now and struggles that will occur in the future.
People could begin to heal, which is critical. And also people will be able to understand what is behind some of the anger and some of the frustration that not only parents that went through the system or their parents went through the system and they didn't because they were sent to another school because the parents just didn't want them to be a part of it. Also, you will be able to understand what's behind some of the anger and frustrations that teachers experience.
That a lot of people have buried it and run away from it and not been willing to really look at it. And I think that by creating a space where people can come together to begin to really look at what happened and look at their own, to look at themselves and what part they played in it, positive or negative, I think can only contribute and contribute in a positive and a healing way toward change.
It would be important to me that people really start talking about their understanding of what happened, even though they may not have lived through it, in the light of what their experiences have been with Boston Public Schools. So I think it would be important to have that conversation and then bridging to their experiences now based on the experiences of people who went through the whole desegregation, whether they were teachers, students, parents, or just people who lived in the community during that time.
Well, I like the word truth that is being used for this project. My understanding is that originally it was a two-word phrase, truth and reconciliation. I learned firsthand from people who were involved in the Truth and Reconciliation Project in South Africa how difficult it is to face the truth and to reconcile truth. So some might say by comparison what went on in Boston was not at the level that it was in South Africa, but it certainly was a modicum. So I think I would emphasize the truth part of it and hope that that will reveal to people that the healing process is extremely important.
Yeah, I think one is for people to know what it is that they believe. I think self-respect and respect for others, respect for where people come from, what people's values and belief systems are. I think when people have a strong belief about education and what that means and have it defined for themselves and not constantly being defined by somebody else. I think that's important. I believe in the power of education. I believe that it is a form of freedom. And I also think that education is more than the formal process that takes place inside of a classroom. I think education is a lifelong process that even in every interaction with another human being is a potential learning opportunity. So when you're open to other people, wherever they are at, wherever they come from, there's a possibility that you're going to learn something that you didn't know. And I think one of the greatest things schools can teach you how to do, which they fail to do, is when schools can teach you how to ask questions that will cause you and the other person to reflect in a very thoughtful way, then you're in a learning situation, unlike the lawyer, who says you don't ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Well, a good education process will teach you how to do both.
The values that I see being really important is the values around creating a space where all voices can be heard, that for people to come and honesty, I think, would be important. People being able to be honest and real with each other. I think a third value that would be really important is really what I would say is being open to really listening. Really listening would be a very important process. To deep listening, I would say, would be for me another important value.
I think it's got to be important that every voice is heard, that no one's voice is disregarded or felt as though less than. I think every voice needs to be heard, from those who embraced desegregation during the time to those parents who pulled their children out of the Boston public schools and put them in alternative schools. There was so much emotion around that period, and I think that all has to be acknowledged in order for people to heal. And so that's important. Every voice has to be heard and every voice has to be validated. People have to be open to hearing other people's frames of reference. So not only do you have to be willing to share your lens, but you also have to be willing to hear and try to understand the lens another person may have experienced the whole desegregation project. So that sensitivity and openness to be truthful and honest, and to understand that other people may have felt totally different from you, but that doesn't deny how they felt.